The first drill we want to talk about today is the first thing we start off every practice in the fundamentals of our wide receiver drills is stance and start. A proper stance and start starts from the top and goes down to the bottom for us. And what I mean by that is we want to be in a position where our shoulders are over our knees and our knees are over our toes. And it ultimately puts us in a forward lean position where our shoulders are over our toes. One of the things that we truly emphasize in our stance and start is the ability to push off the ball without having any false steps. And what I mean by false steps is we want to make sure our front foot that's on the ground is pointed straight down the field. And we call that front foot our pointer foot. So always our pointer foot wants to be aiming in the direction that we're going into. Secondly, we want our back heel to be slightly off the ground, but maybe 1.5 inches to 2 inches off. Now we don't want our back foot to be all the way off the ground to where it's always on our toe, because then you're eventually going to have to drop that foot in order to get going back. So we want to eliminate the false steps from our front foot, either from that sliding in or pointing in a certain direction, or from our back foot dropping back down. Then the next phase of our stance to start all starts with our hands. We want to be in a position where our arms are relaxed, our hands are relaxed. We don't really emphasize having our hands up high or down low, but one of the things we do emphasize is not having our hands dropping below our knees on our get off. So we want to be in a proper position that we're able to push off the ball and explode through fluidly. As you can see in our stance to start, we always use a ball to emphasize off stance to start. Now, if you can see the first guy's movement, the guy to the right, you see the slight little bit of false movement right there in his back foot is what we want to eliminate. The guy to the left is doing pretty much what we want. We want to push out. We want to fall out for that first step and want to maintain our same pad level. We don't want to be guys that come off our stance to start and pop straight up. We want to maintain that forward lean that we got on our shoulders and keeping it over our knees and our toes. But as you can see right here, we don't want to have any false steps in our back foot. If there's any movement going on in your back foot pre-alignment, then it most likely means that something's wrong in your stance. Right here, as you can see the guy on the left, you can see his left foot tend to move forward, just move inside just a little bit. Those are the steps that we want to eliminate. As you continue to go through once or twice, you want to start building up to where you're emphasizing straight getting off the ball. At the wide receiver position, it is very critical that there's no wasted movement as you continue to get off the ball. The next drill after stance to start, we get into, we just want to now, we call a second clap spin out. What we're doing is just simulating running a hitch route and catching it and spinning out of it. All of it is continue to play with a burst, continue to play with low pad level, and continue to emphasize the start of every route, which is stance and start. Also during this drill, we also want to continue with our feet pointed down the field, and then also just explode. Now, as you can see right here at the top end of the route, one of the things that we really emphasize is beating the drums at the top of the route, keeping our arms tight. We don't want to get the wide arms and get off balance or get our body from being under control. This next thing that we tend to do is what are called quick foot fire. And this is just basically how we start off our practice here. We want to get our body moving. So after stance to start, we go into a quick foot fire. And basically it's the same as our stance. We want to have our inside foot up, and I just want to see guys fire their feet and fire their hands. One of the things that allows us to do with our feet is allows us to get quick movement. One of the things I truly believe in is your body. It revolves off muscle memory. So the faster your feet, the faster you train your feet all the time, is the faster it moves. But secondly, and probably the thing that's most important in this part of the quick foot fire, is being able to use our arms. We always wanted to call what we say beat the drums at the top, having live hands, live feet. One of the things that we don't want to do in this deal is we don't want to pull our feet together. So as we do a quick foot fire, we still want to keep air in between our feet. And this sometimes shows up on versus press if we got to close the ground versus release, or just anytime we can have our foot fire. We always want to make sure as wide receivers that we have great feet. As you can see, the guys still maintain their forward lean as in their stance. They're just beating the drums at the top and with their feet. That's a really good job from the back end right here, just keeping the air in between it, boom, and firing through. The next thing that we do once we go on from stance and start to quick feet fire is we'll go through a process what we call three-step cut and three-step extend cut. And basically what we're talking about in that, whenever we say a three-step cut, it's a transition cut. And basically these guys want to do, what we want to do is we want to stick it every 3 steps on the outside. As you can see, we get over exaggerated with the head nod at the beginning of practice, because that's the nod that we want to give at the top end of our route. Regardless of whatever route you're running, we truly believe there's a top end of every route, whether that's a go route, whether that's a dig route, or whether that's a post. There's always at some point you're going to stick on the field. So we want to make sure that when we're sticking, the emphasis of this is making sure that we're sticking under the framework of our body. We never want to get overextended. We never want to feel like you're reaching. Right here, if you can see number 7 on his first stick, right here, if I go to pause on our right, whenever he's outside of the framework of his body, now your groin area and your legs are having to overcompensate for that, and it's having to work at a higher pace to kind of bring that muscle back together and get it going back in the opposite direction. So when we talk about sticking, we always want to make sure that we're under the framework of our body. And secondly, we never want to hop into a stick. We want to make sure it's violent at the top end of our route and we're coming out of it with speed. Now, on from three-step cut, we like to do what we call a three-step extend. We talk about there's 2 phases of every cut. There's an extend step, which has us coming forward, and then there's a transition step, which enables us to transition in the direction that we want to go into. So our three-step extend focuses in on the top end of the route. It's the three-step extend to where we're extending now before cut and before we start to transition. Basically, the focus point of this is make sure we're getting our shoulders down. It's almost like we want to throw ourselves forward. As a receiver, we ought to be able to drop on a dime at any point and come up out of our cut. And practicing that with a three-step extend helps us be able to drop down and not give any indicators to DBs of when we're going to rise up, when the top end of the route. We're always keeping our shoulders over our toes. One of the things you can see too is we like to keep our arms tight. We feel that when we're keeping our arms tight, it helps us with our body control coming in and out of cuts. Now, to talk about the three-step cut, the three-step extend, it takes us into what we just briefly talked about, which are the 2 steps of our transition. And that's basically our extend step and our transition step. As you can see, this is one of the things that we start off early on, is just working the basic fundamentals of those 2 steps. The first one's going to be an extend step. The second one's going to be a transition step. And what we have is simulated guys off to the side in the back that'll be throwing the balls. And basically out of this drill is what we want to talk about. I want to get to a position. The first step, we're going to take a pause, and that's going to be our extend step. The second step, which comes in the transition step, we want to make sure we always get our knee going in the direction that we wanted to go to. And the biggest coaching point is we never cut with our eyes, and that's something that I always emphasize to the guys. The knee goes first in the head. Whether we're going flat down the line on a basic route, we got to get that knee going in that direction, or we're coming back to the quarterback. We always want our knee coming in that direction to bring our body, and then our head and our eyes go. So as you can see, these guys, what they're going to do is just going to be 2 steps. I want to make them pause at the top simply because at the point that we go out to make an extend step, it's got to be over our toes. Now, if your shoulders isn't over your toes, you're going to be off balance. And secondly, when we make that pause right here, that back foot, that transition foot, is already up in the air. Both feet can't be on the ground at the same time. So as you see these guys, they're taking that extend step, boom, they're tight, and they're really ripping through that arm, that elbow on the inside to get that knee back around. So we always want to get the knee going into the direction of the quarterback or going into the direction that we're going. So extend step, transition step. We're always going to extend step with our outside foot. in order to get the inside knee going back the other way. Now right here, the guy on the right, he's fairly new, but that's not what we want. We don't want to open up with our eyes there first. That's opening the gate is what we call. We want to be compact, shoulders over your toes, and transition to that step. You can see right here, this time, once we go through with a pause, we go no pause. So you can see what it looks like it's going full speed. Snap that foot around and on an extend step, and then get the knee back going in the direction. Now, based upon cuts, there's two ways we come out of our cut. And basically it all kind of depends upon what route you're running or which way you're coming out of your cut. As you can see right here, the quarterbacks are slightly inside, which may simulate a hook route or a curl route. We don't have to turn our foot simply at the top end of the route as much as if we were running what we have comebacks or any kind of route where we retrace back down the stem. In those cases, we would turn our foot slightly a little bit more at the top end in order for us to open up our hips and get our knee going right back down the same stem that we came from. So as here, they're having to come back on a curl route. It's quick, slightly no turn of the foot at the top on the extend step. They're just driving the knee back now to the quarterback. Really be violent throwing that elbow too, and it all starts up top. The more compact you are with your upper bodies, the faster your feet and the faster you're going to transition in and out of your cuts. The next thing we go to right here is just simply our karaoke curl. And basically karaoke curl basically allows us to warm up in a way that we're able to kind of loosen up our hips, but at the same time, it emphasizes our two steps of transition, which we briefly just covered, our extend step and our transition step. So once they're at the top end of the karaoke, which we usually take out to the bottom of the numbers, I want to see them be violent, snap the foot down, slightly turn, and get the knee back to the quarterback. It's a really good job right here. But number 87 of getting that foot down, getting the knee going, but also, as you can see, now he's got to do a little bit better job of getting his shoulders down, but really he's being violent with his elbows and really bringing it through. Now, one of the things you don't want to do through it is see your toe go down and end up dragging your foot through. So we always want to make sure that our toes are up as soon as we extend step and that knee's coming back to the quarterback, that everything's up off the ground. It's right here. Throw your shoulders and your knee and your foot forward. Both guys right there can do a little bit better job, as you can see right here, of really getting their shoulders over their toes at the top end of the route. We never want to be leaning back. We call that sitting in a chair. Whenever you're sitting back in a chair, only two things can happen. You can either fall over or that chair come up under you and you fall down. So we want to make sure that we're under control and having our shoulders over our toes. We'll work both sides right here. As you can see, these guys really snap it down, get the knee back. And one of the things that also by incorporating a ball at the top end of this, it's very critical for every wide receiver that once they come out of the top end of the route, that they lead with their knees and not with their eyes. But the next phase of it is finding their eyes on the ball. It's really locating that ball in the air. So this allows our guys not to cheat and peek over their shoulder, but really once they come out the top end of the route, it's really find that ball. And right here, we're going to do is just karaoke the out now. Instead of karaoke the curl, we're karaoke the out. So we're really making an emphasis on really snapping that elbow in, that outside elbow in and around, and really snapping the head around and coming out of our cut. And as you can see, one of the things that we focus on our cuts on an out route is always being what we call flat to come back. We want to make sure we're in a position that we're reducing down to the ball. We never want to run an out route where we're gaining ground. The next drill that we'll talk about right here is just simply what we do is called a lateral shuffle, and then it's combined, supersetted with a flip in the hips. And basically out of this lateral shuffle, what we're looking at, everything that we do from a drill standpoint, we always want to be in a stance and start position. So we're overemphasizing just playing comfortable in our stance. But as we go through the drills right here and go through the cones on the lateral shuffle, it's just a quick stick on each outside foot. So just emphasizing just going through there, beating the drums at the top. Now the guy on the right, right here to your right, and the receiver's left, he's doing it wrong. He's flipping the hips, but the guy to the left is going right. We want to make sure those are quick sticks in and out of the drills, in and out of the cones. And one of the things we got to do a better job right here is just getting guys to play with their eyes up, and that's why there's a ball at the top. But as you can see, they're going through the cones, beating the drums at the top. Now the guy has to stay off the cones right here. But we want to make sure we're emphasizing sticking the outside foot, beating the drums at the top, shoulders over our toes. Basically, this is just an agility drill for us, but at the same time, incorporating some of the fundamentals of our route running. We always want to play with great feet. We simply talked about before in our fundamentals about our transition. And transition is something that is truly valuable for every wide receiver in the country. It's how fast you can get in and out of your breaks. How fast can you come back to the ball? So this next drill is just a diagonal cone drill and what we call our transition cuts. And basically like we did in our two-step transition, we want to break it down in two phases and really emphasize each phase. The first phase being, that was already stated, was our extend step. The next phase is our transition step. And the cones are set up basically to be as the quarterback or the direction that we want to go into. So as I push up and make an extend step, overemphasizing shoulders over our toes and keeping everything under the framework of our body and in a cylinder, we want to make sure that next, our second step, our transition step, is going in the direction that we want it to go to, and that is, in this drill, the next cone. So as you see guys come up in this drill, they're going to take an extend step at the top. They're going to pause, making sure that next foot is off the ground, and then they're going to be violent and transition to the next cone. Violent and transition to the next cone. Keeping it tight, not hopping to the cone, sticking it and transition. Sticking it and transition. It's a really good job right here of getting it going and getting that knee going into the direction that we want it to go into and keeping our arms tight. Now right here, as you can see, this next individual kind of gets up there into that first cone, that extra step. Obviously that step right there means that the balance in his body is kind of off. And that may come from a lot of times guys sitting back in the top end of the route or not being under control up to the cone. But we want to make sure when we go to make that extend step on the cone that our shoulders are over our toes. We never want to be getting caught transitioning to the next direction without having our shoulders over our toes. Right here, he's just over sticking the extend step. Remember, we always want that over the framework of our body. It's a good job right here of getting the knee up and going. We just got to finish at the end of the drill. It's a really good job right here. We don't want to be caught bending over in our shoulders and in our back. So as he's kind of crunched up a little bit, we kind of want to be relaxed. We want to run relaxed as a receiver through all our routes and all our cuts. It's a really good job right here on the pause, but make sure that our shoulders is over our toes. Now, the second time through, we will go through a much faster pace with no pause. Now we're going. So now you're going to get the chance to see the knee going into that direction from a faster pace. And one of the things I like to look at when we go at a faster pace is making sure we're not oversticking or overextending at the top end of our route. Making sure that if we laid out there a cylinder or any kind of hurdle that we're not going outside the framework of our body. We never want to get outside of our own shadow. In those cases, when you do overstick, your feet tend to slide up under you or slide away from you, and you can't transition on to the next cut. Still coming through these, we want to make sure our arms are tight. We're beating the drums at the top. beating the drums at the top, live hands. A lot of the times, a lot of the problems that happen with young wide receivers or wide receivers anywhere is you lose your hands at the top end of your route. That's something we really don't want to do, and that's why we overemphasize beating the drums. A lot of catches are missed in football because the hands have to shoot from below the waist instead of from up above the waist. So as you can see, we're going through fast pace on this one and just really sticking it and moving on to the next direction. We don't want to get as oversticked right there. One of the things also to watch in this deal is just making sure that you're not rising and your pad level isn't getting any higher than for the position that you start in. So we really want to make sure that our shoulders are down in a forward lean position at all times, and we're not hopping to the next cut or transitioning too high. The next drill that we're going to talk about right here is our arches. And basically what this does, it takes everything that we've built up to this point. It incorporates our footwork and our fundamentals, and it focuses on getting your shoulders over your toes, but it also focuses on not running around your feet at the top end of the route and really making sure that you take a good extend step and transition step and get your knee back to the quarterback. But the thing that I really love the most about the arches is it helps you play within the framework of your body. And constantly you've heard me talk about playing within the framework of your body, and you're probably wondering, what do I mean by that? And what I mean by that is we want to make sure that we're as compact as can be at the top end of the route. And as you can see how these arches are built, they're not very tall. So what they do is they make the guys get their shoulders down at the top end, but they also make sure that the elbows are tight, because as you go through these, if you're out of order or you're wide and your arms are flopping or you're too tall, you're going to end up knocking it over. So it's a real good piece of equipment to use to make sure that guys are disciplined at the top end of the route with body control. As you can see right there, we don't want to make sure that we just get up in there and drop. We ought to be running at a level that our pad levels are just there, is down and forward. So at the top end, for a lot of taller guys, they kind of feel a lot of pressure right here because they got to get down up under it. But we want to make sure that that same pad level that gets us through there is the same pad level that we're running throughout the route. One of the things that getting your shoulders down over your toes allows you to do is transition at a much better speed rather than when you're up tall. And one of the problems that guys face when they're too tall is they can't transition all the way back to the quarterback or back to the ball. This drill is set up for us to really attack it. And as you can see right here, we'll focus on doing curls. We'll do comebacks, and we'll do flat down the line basics. And one of the things that we look for when we come flat down the line is we want to make sure we're not drifting. So the minute we make that extend step and stick our outside foot, we get the knee flat going down the line. We want to go in there to where we're attacking the ball. We're making sure we're flat, we're compact, and we're coming in there to attack it. And it's a really good job right here. If you see these last two right here, both of these guys sticking the outside foot and getting the knee there. And what the arches do is you see these guys aren't cutting with their eyes. They're not peeking at the top end of the route. They're disciplined, they're compact through, and they're coming flat down the line. And one of the things that we can do a little bit better job right here is really focusing on the guy to the right is not getting the elbows out too wide. Keep them tight, but beat the drums at the top. So we will work on both sides, really giving them a feel for coming down on both sides. A lot of guys like to play one way, one side of the field, always to the field, always to the boundary. We train guys to run every route each way. One of the things this also does is makes guys come back on the ball. As you can see, in these drills. We just don't want to run a curl route or a hook route and just stop at the top end of the route. But we want to come back on it. Now, as you can see what happens when you're not getting your shoulders down, as you can see right here, this individual right here, what happens is at the top end of the route, instead of getting his shoulders down, he just drops down in his waist and bends at the knees and the waist. Well, that's not going to get you through. As you can see, his shoulders are back, his head is straight up, and he hits the top of the hurdle or the arch, and now it's over. So what he has to do a better job at the top end of the route is getting his shoulders over his toes, shoulders over his knees and over his toes. As you can see right here, he's sitting back, and now it gives him a tough point to transition back to the ball. Now, this next drill that we want to talk about, it's once we've already established our footwork and our fundamentals. One of the things that we want to talk about now is route running versus press. And one of the things we really spend a lot of time on is beating press, not only at the front of the route, but at the back of the route. And as you'll see, we have two dummies set up, and this is what I call release on a pass by drill. And basically this drill is set up for us to work a simulated release on a pop-up dummy at the top end of at the front end of the route. But also as we're running, whether it be a curl or a hook, a basic route, anything that we have to come flat down the line, but it enables us to work our hands at the top end of the route and really work our hands and get guys off of us. So as you'll see this guy attack this dummy coming forward, he's going to work a release, and we work many different releases here. Basically, we give guys different options, about 3 different kinds of releases, and whether it's a single move release, a double move release, or a speed release, we want guys to play with fast hands. And one of the things we emphasize in working releases is we have to get the defender going into the direction that we want them to go into in order for us to work that release. And simply what I mean by that is we have to attack them in a certain direction, have to work them at the line. One of the things that we do first off from a release standpoint is see how fast we can get our foot back up to a balanced position and then work that release, but playing fast with our hands. So as you'll see the wide receiver right here, he's going to attack this defender. Now he's working a single move release outside where he's going to stab him inside. He's going to come to balance, stab him inside. We want to work the DB off his line. We got to get him going the opposite direction of where we want to go. So as he works a rip right there. In our hands, we want to be compact. We want to be tight. We want to be fast. And the first things first is whenever we're going against anything where we're working a release, we want to play with live hands and keep our hands up above our waist. So no longer are we in that stance to start where our hands are relaxed. Our hands are in a position where we want to get them on the defender as fast as possible. So as he's working this release right now, he beats it, and now he's coming up at the top end of the route. And basically what he's working right there is he's working the club hand on his inside, but his second hand is what we call a short arm swat. We want to get the defender's arm down, because what happens in a lot of these cases is at the top end of the route, guys want to put their hands on you and grab you, so we want to get their hands off of us and then come on back. Now, as you can see, if I was to slow-mo this, that one of the things we cannot do is in order to take a false step in our footwork, we can't focus too much on our hands to where we're taking false steps on our footwork. Excuse me. So as he's coming here, one of the things he's got to do is he's got to get his shoulders over his toes. But as you can see, he goes to stick his outside foot, and now he's running around his inside. We never want to do that. We never want to sacrifice our footwork in order to play with our hands. So at the top end of this route, we're not only working our hands, but we're also continue to work our feet. Boom. This is a really good job right there. As you can see, we go back and rewind this one. Working a release at the top end, and now our release part, and I won't spend too much time talking about the releases, but we never want to be that big with our arms. We want that arm to be shorter and smaller and much faster. The reason being, we never want to give the DB the surface of our underpads, because if they typically get in that position, it's much harder to get their hands off of them. So we want to be short, and we call that a swat. But at the top end, look at him playing violent with his hands at the top end. He sticks that foot. Now he gets the knee back to go to the quarterback, where he's able to drive back on that ball. Now, he didn't work a release at the top, and he's a guy that's very new to the position that's working it forward. So, he'll be getting better as the drills go. But we want to work a release at the top end of it. One of the things right here, if you can see, this individual comes up at the top end of the route, doesn't get his shoulders down, and that's what happens. If you're ever caught sitting back in that chair with your shoulders back, you're going to end up sliding because your feet come up from up under you. So now we'll switch it up. We just came back on the curl. Now we're going to come flat down the line as if we're running a basic route. And what we've done right here now is we've backed the receiver up to now he has a corner that's playing what we call a motor technique. He's going to be backing off of the corner. So what we talk about in that release phase is we want to close the ground as fast as possible and recreate a new line of scrimmage. And as we do that, that's when the quick feet fire and the different drills like that tend to show up. Because we want to close it as fast as possible, and one of the things that we don't want to do is overstride up to the DB. We want to be in a position that we close the ground as fast as possible and we come to balance. So you'll see shorter and choppier steps tend to be once a guy's closing the ground on a DB. Watch him through this. Boom, boom. Right down there, he's working his hands at the top end. Coming flat down the line. Really good job right here. Shoulders down over his toes. Sticks the outside foot, comes flat. Want to beat it with speed. Now, one of the things we don't want to do at the top end on the pass by is we don't want to have our hands overextended. And that's where penalties tend to come in. And as you can see right here, he's closing the ground. He's working his hands at the top end, and now he's coming flat down the line. And as we stated, we don't want to be as big at the top end of this drill, but we want to be fast with our hands and be violent. We want to work to the elbow of the defender. If we feel we can get to his elbow and get his shoulders turned, we've won. But we've got to play with violent hands at the top, fast feet as well. It's a great drill to work the top end of the route as well as the beginning of the route, working a release and working what we call a pass by. And that pass by can happen on a curl route. It can happen on any time you're trying to cross the defender's face and you've got close man-to-man coverage. Right here, he just has, instead of rounding his cut, he's got to get his shoulders down at the top, stick the outside foot, and get the knee coming flat down the line. We never want to drift off the line to where we catch the ball. And this is too fast. He ran around his cut right there. So we never want to lose the emphasis of our footwork whenever we're working our hands and our technique versus pass by. And the ways that these show up, I'll show you right here. This is just a simulated one-on-one that happened later on in practice. And this is working the pass by technique. As you can see, he's working a release at the top end of the route. He's got a DB in close quarters. He has to get the arm down. Now, although this pass wasn't completed, as you can see, the footwork and the hands are what gets this guy into a position where he's able to come back on the ball and he's able to make a play if the ball is put on him. And as you can see it from the back end, it's the same. He's working a release. He's closing the ground on this guy, trying to recreate a new line of scrimmage. Now, he could probably close the ground a little bit tighter, and now he's in this position. He wants to get back to a position where he's working a stack on the DB, but also now that the DB is not in a position where he's beat originally from the start, he wants to lean on him. He wants to invite contact now that he's able to play with his hands. This is another one-on-one scenario where you see him leaning. Now he's playing with his hands at the top end of the route. When you look at it from the back. Now, his release from the start is a little bit out of control, and we want to be compact. We want to come to balance, close the ground on this guy and work him. He could possibly work him in a little bit more, but we don't want to be that wild with our hands. We want to be short, get the DB arms off of him right here. But now he's back leaning on him. You see him, boom, playing with his hands. Good. Really good job at the top end. We just don't want to push off as much with that backhand. The second arm, as you can slow it down, as soon as we get his arm down right there, I go back to lean on him. I just want to give him a slight nudge right there, but I want to bring that second arm, his outside arm, straight down and rake the DB's hand down. Another scenario where a pass by works, boom, right there. He's able to come back on the ball by getting the hands on him first. We want to play with fast hands. If you allow the DB to put his hands on you, which they are taught to do, they want to fill up on the wide receiver. They want to cut you off in your route by playing with their hands. But the faster we play with ours and the more violent we play with ours at the top end of the route, it enables us to come back on this ball right here.